call the meeting. Hold your comments and whatever. So call the meeting to order. We need to approve the agenda as printed. So moved. Second. Motion has been made and seconded to approve the agenda as printed. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, Paul. That is carried. Public comment on agenda items. Hearing none, seeing none. Communications shared by the Solid Waste Management Board members.
Supervisor Eisen's got something to say.
Why did I not think you would? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On Monday, June 13th, I attended a remote Judiciary and Public Safety Committee meeting. And at that meeting, they discussed the Corporation Council presented an overview of our suit with City of Oshkosh and their sector. I would invite you to see the committee video of that presentation and my comments in the additional explanation of the situation.
So let's approve them.
The videos are available online, and you got to search for it where from the Winnebago County website, and you have to go to where they have the committee's videos. You can see all the videos of the committees. I think you can even see our last solid waste committee, or maybe the last two. It's a must-do.
There's been a motion and a second. We just need. And then, Paul, did you hear? We made a motion and a second for the meeting minutes.
I didn't catch it all because all these big semis are resting on the side because the wind is too heavy for them to proceed westward or eastward. It's a real hazard. Anyway, I approve the minutes that we had.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Let's go to number 6. Highway beneficial use study. Okay. Drum roll.
Yeah, something we've been waiting for a while for. The board approved a proposal from Cornerstone and Tetra Tech last fall, and we finally got to the point with the departure of Zach and me trying to take over. Things got a little discombobulated, but we finally got a final report from Cornerstone, Tetra Tech. So we have Lee Daigle and Mark Torzani on remotely here, and they have a PowerPoint they'll walk you through, and you'll have a chance to ask questions at the end. And so we'll just go from there. So I'll turn it over to Lee and Mark, and hopefully you can hear us all right and see the board members that are present.
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. Can you see a computer screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. So you see the presentation. All right. So my name is Lee Daigle. I apologize for not being there in person this week. Mark Torzani is also with us. This is going to be a real quick 15-minute presentation of the landfill gas beneficial use study, and then we've saved time for questions and really a discussion, because what comes out of this is, where do we go from here? Let's see if I can control this thing. There we go. So for the agenda, we're going to go through the introductions. We did a real brief one. We'll talk about a background of the project, where it came from, what it started, how it's been moving forward. We selected several scenarios to analyze. So we'll go through each of those scenarios and kind of a very high overview of the technology and what would be associated with each of those. We have a section on the results and recommendations, which I'm sure is what everyone's excited to see. And then lastly, we'll leave time for discussion and questions. So for introductions, I'll go first because I'm still talking. My name is Lee Daigle. I'm a client manager with Tetra Tech. And I've heard Cornerstone and Tetra Tech, just so everyone knows. Cornerstone is a subsidiary of Tetra Tech, so we just go by Tetra Tech. So you'll see that all over the place. But we are, Mark was one of the original members of Cornerstone. I joined Cornerstone 6 years ago also. I've been in the industry for 20 years. I actually was a project manager for Dane County's RNG facility. And I'm involved in the industry all over the place and teaching classes also. Mark?
So Mark Torzani, I got my career starting in this business over a place some of you might know, Donahue over in Sheboygan, and worked over there a long time. Started working on landfill gas projects, landfill gas to energy as an intern. So I've been working on biogas projects through most of my career, and I always liked specializing in, what can we do with this gas? How do we put it to beneficial use? So I've been involved in that, and that includes 16 years, which is hard to believe, on renewable natural gas and biogas, landfill gas as a vehicle fuel. And one of those things I'm proud of is have a patent on the Bio Cng system and listed as one of the inventors on that. So we're a member of the Swan Board here in Wisconsin, and I've taught a number of classes through the years. So I'm just thrilled to be part of this here. I'm from Wisconsin, Wausau originally, and always like giving back.
Excellent. Thanks, Mark. So a little background on the project. The overall study, and this came out when Zach was involved in late 2021, third quarter 2021. The objective was to really, first off, we need to confirm your landfill gas generation rates and your collection rates. Do they match with what we had anticipated? Then we're going to identify potential scenarios for the beneficial use of this gas. We're going to assess them, probably the 3 or 4 most likely ones for an economic pro forma. We'll identify potential risks associated with it. That's the big thing for municipalities and owners is what's the risk? What is the actual risk associated with these projects? We tried to identify some potential needle movers, which we'll discuss during our discussion section. And then, what do we do next? What's the outcome of this? Well, we want to be able to figure out what the next steps are, or be able to recommend some next steps for Winnebago County to be able to take. So to cover the landfill gas generation, this graph that you're seeing is we developed this graph to compare to your actual generation rates. The orange solid line is your anticipated or expected landfill gas generation. Your dotted green line or dashed green line is what we would expect to see for collection system efficiency based on a covered landfill. The actual red squares are where you're at. At first, this troubled us because you're collecting 50% of the gas when we would expect you to be closer to 75. But after discussions with both John and Zach previously, it was determined that you did actions earlier in the landfill's life that probably front-end loaded your landfill gas collection. You had some leachate recirculation. That's going to shift that gas generation earlier in your process. You diverted solid waste when the Tri-County agreement came into effect. Some of the MSW went to other landfills where you expect more sludge. After we saw this, it kind of started making sense. Yes, the numbers appear that they should be higher, but in reality, they aren't as high as they should be or were projected to be. But that being said, you can see your red squares on this graph are stabilizing. They're stabilizing right around 700 SCFM. That's where you're coming down. And talking with Mark and looking at this myself, we expect that flow rate to remain relatively consistent for the next several years as you are declining in your gas generation. You're able to continue the collection of that gas at a pretty consistent clip. The next thing we did, just because we said, well, maybe there's some gaps in coverage in their well field. So we looked at your landfill gas collection system. end of the day, this is a thorough landfill gas collection system. I am sure that there are areas of the gas collection system that can be improved either for vacuum availability or collection system efficiency. But overall, we're looking at big picture items, not this well could be a little bit more vacuum applied to it, or we wish we had a little less vacuum loss in this area. You don't have areas that are going to dramatically improve or increase your collection system rate because of deficiencies in the layout and design of the collection system. It's what we would expect to see for a closed landfill. So in regards to your collection system efficiency, it seems to be on track with what we would expect based on your site's characteristics and your projected flow rates. From here, I'm going to turn it over to Mark for the next couple slides. Mark, I'm controlling it, so just yell when you want to change to the next slide.
Okay. Yeah, we'll go through some of the different scenarios that we actually looked at, and we'll start big picture where we're at. When you start to look at RNG, you're starting to play in the energy field, much more so than electricity. You're playing in fuels, and as we know, fuels go up and down in price. We're at all-time highs right now, listening to reports on the way into work this morning. So kind of just keep that in the back of your head on the volatility of energy and fuel. So the first scenario that we looked at is essentially RNG generation, which is essentially renewable natural gas, taking your landfill gas, turning that into renewable natural gas, which means stripping out some of the contaminants, the CO2. And there's two scenarios there. One is with a direct pipeline injection, which is very similar to what Dane County is doing. Just got done looking at some things for Marathon County. This is why I've been involved in a number of these. The second scenario is on-site vehicle fuel generation. We've done this at a number of facilities, including landfills, and they're actually producing their own compressed natural gas vehicle fuel for use on vehicles at the landfill or off-site. The third scenario, which has been around for an awful long time, is essentially what we call medium BTU gas. You're essentially using that landfill gas with a little bit of cleanup, and you're just using that in a furnace, some sort of a boiler. I've seen things with brick kilns, but you're just using that with very little cleanup in that. Fourth scenario is continued electrical generation. So those are the scenarios we looked at. Next slide, Lee. So this is you'll have this, and could spend an awful lot of time just looking at this one, but this is essentially renewable gas direct injection into a pipeline. This is the most capital intensive project. And you've got your biogas source. We do treat that we have to remove CO2, nitrogen, oxygen, VOCs, siloxanes. There's a very detailed metering station that goes to make sure that you're meeting the quality to inject that gas into an interstate pipeline. These are the Trans-Canada ANR pipelines, and that pipeline interconnection is regulated by the utility, essentially the interstate pipeline company. The payback, on all of these projects can be relatively quick in the terms of 3 years. And we have something called renewable identification numbers. And these are numbers and credits through the federal government. The value on this is actually coming from oil and gas refiners. They're required to essentially have a certain percentage of their fuel, very much like the green electrical and RECs for electricity. This is the same for diesel and natural gas producers. Next slide, Lee. Virtual pipeline, it is the same as the RNG with one exception. You'll see that with some of the dairies in the area have been doing this. Dane County has a system set up on this. We actually used a tube trailer like this for taking it to another fueling station. Rather than injecting that gas into a pipeline, it's going into a tube trailer. You'll see these things going down the highway. I always consider them torpedoes I always thought they looked like torpedoes, but they're compliant, safe. You'll see them going down the highway. The picture on the right on the top is essentially an offloading station where that trailer is being unloaded, and it will be used as vehicle fuel, or it can be put into a pipeline directly. The reason we do this is because there's not a pipeline close. Two reasons. We don't have a pipeline close to inject into, and for small projects, an interconnection may be upwards of $4 million just to connect to an interstate pipeline. So that can become cost prohibitive for small projects. The value of that gas on that last one be slightly less because there's a fee associated with that interconnection for paying for that if you don't have your own. Next one, Lee. Yeah, here's a project, and it's an on-site vehicle fuel. This is essentially a very good option, and it can look very good financially. However, a small amount of biogas, landfill gas, can produce an awful lot of fuel. The projects where we've done direct connection are somewhere in the 50 to 100 to 200 SCFM and supplying a fleet. So the big thing is these look good on number, but it's having a fleet of compressed natural gas vehicles. Here's a fleet of school buses that are there. And the treatment doesn't have to be quite as high as a natural gas pipeline. The vehicle fuel specifications are slightly less. But the key here is getting it up close to or very similar to pipeline standards. The key is having a fleet of vehicles that can use the fuel. And garbage trucks are actually a good use, the hauling trucks, because they're typically using 50 to 60 gallons a day and going out every day, coming to and from the landfill. All right, next one, Lee. Here's our medium use direct pipeline. We've got to have somewhere next to the landfill, next to the source of that can actually use that quantity of fuel. We've seen them up at Wisconsin, Ocean Spray, Cranberry, actually had one going to the Chrysler plant down in Missouri. So there's different uses for this direct fuel. I know the prison near Winnebago has been thought of after a while. This is a very simple project. It is also typically low in return, low capital, and low value fuel. We're typically looking at something that's somewhere in the order of 1/2 to 3/4 of the value of natural gas. All right. And scenario 4 is just taking a look at continued electrical generation. By and large, over the last 5 years, we've seen a lot of electrical generation projects shutting down as power purchase agreements have come to an end. A lot of times these were 10-year agreements for purchasing the electricity. And I think this is a lot of it's due to solar and wind projects coming on board, much easier to operate. And utility companies have invested in those themselves. So if you can still get a power purchase agreement that's viable, certainly a good option, but it's typically not as financial. The one thing that's attractive, and we'll talk about this, is electrical utility companies typically will give you a 10-year power purchase agreement. When we're getting into the fuel market, it's very difficult to get anything more than 1, 2, 3 years. There's few companies out there that will give you a 10-year, but they're taking on that risk and it's going to be a lower value. Okay.
All right, thanks, Mark. So I'm going to run through the results, and then Mark and I will both get into the recommendations after we go through those, and we'll go individually scenario by scenario. So the first scenario, this is the Rng Generation with a direct use, a direct injection. The 10-year net present value of this is $19.6 million with a 3.5-year payback. So the payback is extremely good on this, with an internal rate of return of 27.6. And this is all in the report, by the way. If you have a copy of the report, you don't need to write down these numbers. It's all in the last pages. But in summary on this direct injection, yes, it has an extremely fast payback period, but it also has the highest capital cost associated with any of the projects at $16.9 million. That does include, I believe, a $4 million interconnection. And that is based on Mark and I, we went through this a few years ago with Dane County. We just did it recently with Marathon County, where we're looking at injection points and what it's going to cost. Part of the problem with the direct injection is that the TransCanada's, the A&R, they can pick any price that they want for this interconnection. And we've seen it range from $2 million to $5 million. This is it. This is your interconnection that you're seeing on this photo here. It's just a pipe going into the ground. There's metering equipment that you'll need to purchase to do this also. So it's kind of interesting that the pipeline company gets to set their own value, but they do. The payback on both this project and the RNG with a virtual pipeline is closely tied to the RIN value. Now, the RINs, what Mark described before, is the renewable identification numbers. Those are a federally mandated value, but they fluctuate. They can go up and down. And when it was, let's see, 2016 election, when President Trump came in, there was a lot of concern as to what's going to happen with this RIN market. Is he going to close it? Is it going to change? We've seen stability in this market since the RIN was created. However, there's a lot of uncertainty, and that's the risk right there with these RNG projects. That's why you won't likely get a 10-year contract. You're going to get 2, 3, 5 years at most on most of these RNG project contracts because of the uncertainty associated with the market. This does require a pipeline nearby, but based on a preliminary examination, you do have pipelines sufficiently close, and they should be able to be tied into. But that's when the next step is talking with A&R, talking with TransCanada to really get some of the information about those pipelines. Just because there's a pipeline nearby, it may be at seasonal capacity, and you may not be able to tie into it. So the next step, if this is proceeded with, is to get in contact with TransCanada right away and start talking about the interconnection. The scenario 1B, which is the RNG generation with a virtual pipeline. Again, it's a lower 10-year net present value with a slightly longer payback period. It is still fast payback period. I mean, under 5 years for paying back $15 million is outstanding. However, again, this is tied to that RIN market. So if the RIN market fluctuates, you aren't going to get that same return on your investment. The additional cost that you're going to have on this type of project, first off, the operations goes up quite significantly. It's about $1 million more a year in your operational cost, because now you're hauling that vehicle or that RIN, the RNG, back and forth between your site and an interconnection point. So your operations increases. You also will still potentially, depending on scenario, have a cost for an interconnection and an offload station at another facility. As of right now, Mark and I are aware of 2 offload stations in the state of Wisconsin. One is Dane County, which was the first in the country actually to do this sort of a system, where they have an offload station on site to accept anybody's gas. The other one that we're aware of is a dairy with digester gas. However, from our information, the dairy is not a public interconnection offload station. It is a private, meant only for partners within that dairy equipment. So there is potentially the need to examine another offload station or look at using Dane County's offload station. But we'll get into that when we go into the discussion section of this. Scenario 2, the on-site vehicle fuel. Again, this, like Mark said, it's always an attractive option, right? This is outstanding. A 2 to 3 year payback period with a 43% IRR or internal rate of return. That's outstanding. But this assumes that you have at least 20 large trucks, trash trucks, city buses, something like that, a collection vehicle, using 50 DGEs or diesel gallon equivalents a day. And this is every day, 365 days, Saturday, Sunday. Otherwise, you need to start looking at having storage and capacity and then tracking that. It's an extremely attractive option, provided you have the fleet. So we have that here. Now, in discussions with John and then previously with Zach, it was understood that there is a fleet that uses your facility, but they fill at the nearby Quick Trip. I don't know if that's an option of going into a contract with them long-term. The value of this gas, by the way, is tied directly to the cost of compressed natural gas from a store like Quick Trip. And generally, you're looking at 50% of the value to 75% of the value. So if they're paying, $1 a DGE, you're getting 50 cents to 75 cents. So your payback period is tied directly to the cost of energy, the cost of natural gas.
Lee, one comment on that
Yes.
last one is that payback does not include, and early on, it does not include the price of the vehicles or converting vehicles.
Right.
This is an
right.
assumption that those CNG vehicles are already there, and that's not part of that payback.
Right. And, historically, I remember looking at CNG vehicles, in 2007, 2008 timeframe, and the constraining factor was the cost of the conversion of the engine from diesel over to CNG. That cost has come down since then, but it's still a prohibitive item. If you don't have a fleet available, converting a brand new fleet is prohibitive. Scenario 3 is a medium BTU direct use project, and Mark mentioned the prison. Now this, on paper, this looks great. We didn't actually pencil out the economics though, because if they aren't willing to discuss it, it doesn't go anywhere. In previous discussions with some of the members of the board and also with Zach and John, you tried to talk to the prison. You had agreements between the local levels, and then when it got to Madison level, it was shut down. This is a great project because it sits right next to your landfill. It's extremely close. Prisons generally have a fairly stable demand for natural gas for heating their waters or any process, any boilers that they may have. The financial payback is going to be slower on a project like this because they're only offsetting that fuel that they're using. However, it's extremely low in capital cost. All you need to do at your facility is filter the gas, dehumidify or remove the moisture, and then compress it. It's essentially systems that you already have for your existing facility infrastructure that can just be put on the front end of a project like this. So before you do an economic pro forma on this, and before you really get going on it, you need to at least have a discussion with the prison. Say, is this something we can do? Is there a project here? Can we move this forward? Start showing them the numbers of how much fuel do you use? Get their information and then back calculate if it's viable for you, is how we would do a direct use project. This, by the way, we just did this for Cranberry Creek. They are going into negotiations with Ocean Spray, which is where their direct use project goes. And this is the exact process they went through. How much gas do you use? We want to continue to feed your system. And then they were able to come to negotiations on the numbers. So the last scenario is the continued electrical generation. Now, just yesterday, by the way, I heard that this has gone slightly different than when Zach and I talked about it back in late 2021. When I was talking to Zach originally, he said, yeah, the PPA is coming in at like 2 cents a kilowatt hour. That's what we modeled. At that value, at 2 cents a kilowatt hour, we cannot advise you to proceed with the project only because it is going to lose revenue for you. You will lose money in that project. Now, yesterday, talking to John, he said, hey, there is a parallel track going on with continued negotiations on the PPA. And he gave us some updated numbers. And I don't have them handy, but I think it was like 4 cents and 3 cents on peak, off peak. That is a better number for sure. And we do have an updated pro forma that we just got from our engineering staff this morning. What I'll say is that the numbers, well, we'll look at it more thoroughly, but generally a 5 to 6 cents per kilowatt hour is the payback that you're going to need to make a project feasible. It may even be a little bit north of that, because if there's engine generator sets that need to be replaced or significant maintenance on them, you need to incorporate that additional capital expenditure into your model. So if this is something that you are still continuing with and you're getting better numbers, I think we should refine this pro forma with not only the new PPA values, which we've done, but also let's take a real hard look at your existing infrastructure. What is really needed? Is it a full replacement? Do you need to replace heads? Do you need to just do some additional maintenance on it. Let's get those numbers tightened down a little bit to give you a realistic value if the discussions are truly going in a beneficial direction for you.
Lee, one item on the electrical generation, which comes up from time to time is, hey, well, we're going to just work directly, very much like the direct use of the gas. Hey, we've got an industry next to us that we're just going to sell them the electricity directly. That is not an option in the state of Wisconsin because you now become regulated as a utility. The utility companies have that. You can offset and use the electricity yourself, but you cannot sell that electricity to anyone but another utility without becoming regulated like a utility. So,
Right.
you know, if anybody thought of that, and we've looked at that before, and it's just not an option. I think there's called a monopoly. The utilities have on providing electricity to their area.
So the discussion section, you know, we're going to cover this real fast, but then we want to open this up for questions and really just kind of flush out the next steps here. But in general, and this is worded in a particular way, Sunnyview has limited potential for a utilization project as you have this declining landfill gas generation rates. And that really hurts a long-term project, which is one of the key factors of, you know, the RNG, for example. You don't want declining gas generation because there's so much uncertainty in the RIN market. In regards to the next step, you know, Mark and I talked about this yesterday. We said, well, the next step is, do you want to proceed forward? You, as the board, need to make the decision if this is something still feasible. I have lots of clients who have closed landfills who are shuttering their landfill gas electrical projects down and flaring the gas because the payback isn't there. You can save costs, you can have avoided maintenance, you can save yourself a lot of headache with just shutting down the plants. That is a realistic option here if the county decides to go that way. But if you say, no, we want to be green, we want to proceed with some sort of a utilization project, then it really is updating that economic pro forma based on that most recent PPA and really refining that electrical generation one, you know, site information. You have one engine that needs this much work on it. You have another one that needs this much. That would be bringing in vendors to take a look at your equipment, getting real quotes. The price of everything, by the way, has increased and continues to increase on a weekly basis, it seems like. Computer chips, getting PLCs, getting equipment is just going up and up and up. That all needs to be incorporated into this model if you're going to make a real educated decision on the landfill gas to electrical generation. The next one is, you know, really have a discussion with the prison. That is a very attractive project if you can come to terms with, first off, the local prison level officials, but also the state level officials. If you can make that work, that's an attractive option because of the low capital costs associated with it. The third potential step, and this is if you as the county say, no, we really want to try and capitalize on the RNG market, we're comfortable with the risk. The easiest approach, well, I don't know if it's going to be the easiest or not, but the most likely approach right now is utilizing and leveraging your tri-county agreement. With the RNG facility at Outagamie, they already have an interconnect. They've already paid that $2 to $5 million to get that T installed on that line. You could engage Outagamie County to determine if they would like to install an offload station. Now, that is possible. That is something we can do. We can put an offload station at Outagamie, put a filling post at your facility. You would fill up tanker trucks and tank them to Outagamie. Again, you're going to have reduced capital on that because you don't have to pay for that interconnect, but you do have to pay for the offload stations. Unless, and this is that last item there, if Outagamie is a possibility for an offload station, right? The energy developer on site who is responsible for that gas, who has those gas rights, may be willing to talk to Winnebago County about Sunnyview, right? This may fit in their portfolio. There are energy developers out there who focus on smaller projects, closed landfills that they can get the gas, get it into a pipeline at one of their other interconnects. That is a possibility. But again, with only the private dairy as the current offload station, and then Dane County. Dane County is a pretty far haul. And with fuel prices right now, it may not be feasible to do that haul distance, but that's something that could be examined. Mark has a great story about talking to a dairy farmer about hauling natural gas that I'm sure he'll say if we give time here.
Well, I
So-
think this is it. We got into this interesting. I think we were looking at in the same area and these same farms, haul distance of 60 miles to take that RNG to the offloading station. And the dairy farmer said, there's no way that's possible. There is no way that that's going to be economic. So I said, well, how far do you haul your milk? He said 75 miles. He said, this is worth more than the milk. So then he got it. It's all relative.
So that is the presentation and the summary of the beneficial use study. We want to open it up to any and all questions. I'll leave the slides up here in case we need to go back to anything and look at anything, but I want to thank you all for your time today. And yeah, if there's any questions at all that we can help to answer.
Yeah, one question, I'm always looking for a loophole. You say that we could use the energy ourselves. Who are we? We are a county entity, so doesn't, if solid waste can use that energy, couldn't it also be used by the highway department and possibly the jail, because we're kind of all a county facility?
Yes, so you can use it internally. You cannot get paid for it. The reason generally we try to not model that is because there is zero revenue or cost avoidance for the solid waste department, right? You're going to have all the capital on that. You're going to have all the O&M on that. But you, as the solid waste department, are getting zero benefit from it. And it's when you get into those sort of cost sharing issues, you get into O&M cost. Hey, maybe the highway department's going to take 80% of this gas. Maybe they take 80% of the O&M cost associated with it. That's where it gets into the gray area with selling your electricity. Now,
That's right. I was involved in one project early down here. If it can go to another building or another agency within the county, that is a possibility. I know at Dane County early in my career, they had it's not even there anymore. It was kind of the asylum sanitary. I'm sure I'm not using the right politically correct term. Lee will laugh at me because I'm aging myself, but they provided electricity to that hospital of sorts. And, that's since been shut down. Some of it comes upon how far the transmission lines. You are not going to be able to wheel power through the general transmission lines of the utility to another entity. That was a direct connection from that landfill. And it was very close to Verona, directly to that building from the genset. So there are some options there, but it's a very, I think, limited situation, and it's going to have to be something very close to the landfill, and maybe that is the prison potentially.
and again, there's no revenue for you with that or cost avoidance.
One other question, if I may. I know we tried this once with natural gas, and I'm dating myself 15, 20 years ago. That was the worst running vehicle we ever had in our entire life. We got a plaque from the state because we converted, but we couldn't go anywhere with it. Is that improved so that now with the high fuel prices that this natural gas running of vehicles is clean and decent and more people towards it?
I'll answer that. There's been quite an improvement in for the Department of Ag, Trade and Consumer Protection. One of my first presentations on biogas to vehicle fuel was in 2007. And we started working on some projects and vehicles, and we were converting them. Cummins Westport has some great engines. You're seeing, no issues, I think, with the engines. The car manufacturers have stopped small trucks, primarily for the buses, and semi trucks, a lot of them running on CNG. Frito-Lay trucks up to 700 miles. Quick Trip has invested. They're running a lot of their trucks right now on CNG. And because of that, have CNG stations placed through Quick Trip. I think there is, I don't know, 3 or 4 of them here in the Madison area. They're spread up and down along the west coast of Lake Michigan, you know, from Green Bay down to Milwaukee, Chicago. I know there's one in Dubuque. So that's gotten quite a bit better of the vehicles. And I know we were doing a project with Alliant Energy on vehicles. I got the same comment. Hey, we tried one of those CNG vehicles. We got that, you know, it was like in the late 70s, early 80s. We tried it. It was terrible. My response to him was, how was your cell phone back then? And technology has improved quite a bit. And the vehicles are, you know, I think very reliable and very good, and actually much lower maintenance because the fuel is so clean.
Just had a question on the BTU values of CNG versus the RNG, that the E85 gas compared to regular gas, there's a lower BTU value. Is that similar with this, or are they similar BTUs? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so if you do a vehicle fuel project, it is slightly lower BTU values than RNG, because RNG has to be cleaner. There has to be less contaminants in it because it needs to meet pipeline quality. And the difference is, you know, RNG that's put in a pipeline, it could end up in someone's stove in their home. That's why there's that difference. So the tariff level, which is the limit on pipeline quality, is generally much finer, much tighter. Whereas vehicle fuels, yeah, they can have a little bit less heating value. They can have a little bit more oxygen, and it's not going to cause any detrimental issues to the engine. So it's very close though. The systems are similar.
With gas in the pipeline, there's a lot of the heavier hydrocarbons, pentane, ethanes, heavy hydrocarbons. We don't have any of those. We're strictly pure methane is what we're using as a vehicle fuel. It can be less in a vehicle. There's a vehicle fuel standard, SAEJ 1616, which is the Society of Automotive Engineers. That fuel spec for natural gas engines is slightly less than what you would see going into a interstate pipeline or for pipeline injection. It can be the same, or it can be slightly less.
Thank you.
And I don't know if this relates to this presentation, but if there was a interconnect at Outagamie, do we have any clue what Brown County is doing? It seems like the interconnect is the best payback if Outagamie had one, and Brown, I don't know why Brown would want to go to electricity at this point from what we've seen.
So what I can say is that I had a very long conversation with Chad back at WIRMC, specifically about RNG and about the Tri-County agreement.
That's Brown County.
Yeah, Chad Doverspike from Brown County. Yeah, he's the solid waste director for Brown. And in those discussions, you know, at WRMC, I gave a presentation on Rng Generation, and he said, boy, I wish we knew some of these things when we did our projects. And they started talking about their new landfill and said, well, is there things we can do now to prep for this project? And I said, absolutely. So there are activities you can do for your new landfill to get yourself ready for an RNG project, to start earlier, to get better gas quality. They are actively looking at the potential for a project. Now, they are probably 3 years away from getting steps taken for this. But with the leverage that you have on the tri-counties, I personally think that having all 3 counties have RNG facilities on site and then have one injection point with an offload station makes a ton of sense, right? You have agreements in place already for your waste relocation or your waste distribution. You can do an amendment or an add-on contract for bringing in RNG to these facilities. So I think it's highly likely or possible that all three counties could work together to make these small landfills, your closed site, Brown County's future closed site, make these viable and attractive to an energy developer, right? Bundle them up. I certainly think that's a possibility. It is something that Brown County, I think, has on their mind. Without going too much into the things that I've discussed directly with Chad, but I think that's a very viable option, and that's why one of our recommendations is, boy, if this is a feasible project, let's get out of gaming and Winnebago and us sitting in a room together and talking about, if this moves forward, how would this look? Because you can set up the contracts right now to be used by others, including Brown County. There's a lot of landfills up there that, if they had an interconnection point nearby, would be feasible for an RNG project. Right now, there isn't one nearby that makes it economically feasible. And just to add this, we didn't go into it a whole lot, but the Dane County project, where they had this open offload station, was the first of its kind in the country. They met with the EPA quite extensively, along with their consultant on the administrative side of it, to figure out how to make sure there were no bad actors. That's what the EPA is concerned about with these sort of systems, right? Is there a bad actor there?
In a bad actor, there's so much money involved in this renewable natural gas, especially from the digesters. The bad actor is essentially, there's the potential to take natural gas at $6 to $7 a decatherm and turn it into renewable natural gas that might be worth 10 times that amount.
Right.
So we're talking about a lot of money and a lot of potential when you're talking about those kind of dollars for fraud. So what we see is some very extensive monitoring at these injection points to make sure that that gas is truly renewable natural gas coming from a biogas source and not just natural gas cleaned up to look like biogas, renewable natural gas.
Right. And it's paperwork, it's tracking the loads, it's making sure you have manifests for everything. You would need
Right.
metering stations at both ends, but these are things that we have already worked through with Dane County, which could be feasible for out of gaming.
It is, and in most injection points where you'll see a tube trailer like this are dedicated to one biogas source. We have farms that have a strict metering station and an offloading station. I think one in New York we did has 6 offloading station, 1 offload station for each farm, and 1 metering station. And these metering stations are about $700,000 each. So you're looking with the offload station, everything about $1 million for each offload station, but it was worth it. 7 farms, 6 farms, each one had their own station.
And this photo on the screen, by the way, this is the Dane County offload station. Tube trailers are backed up to the offload station. The piping behind it is part of it. That's a compression and decanting essentially. And then the building immediately behind it is actually a recompression station for when the gas pressure in the vessels drops below the pressure in the pipeline. You have to recompress it. So this is the exact sort of a system that we would be talking about.
Yeah, one of the things I'll say about this, we have some 4 basic, kind of the options here, and there are sub options to this, even at Dane County. It isn't that all of the gas has to go into an injection point. You can use some of this fuel for your own vehicles if you've got a small fueling station there. And we were working with sites in Minnesota, others, hey, we want to be green, we're part of the community. This is part of our permitting process. We have to have a green project here. We're giving fuel to the host community, things like that. There are sub options to this. So it's not, without just kind of let you know, we're giving you the big picture here and want to find out if there's interest in moving further.
Yeah, a couple of things. The first thing is, it looks like if we zero in on this sort of the direct injection or the trucking, so to speak, there is, as you said, a rather extensive potential capital cost, depending upon negotiation. How long are we talking about in terms of getting all the capital projects in place to actually make something like this viable?
is that a question for us or for your own board about acquiring the capital?
I don't know who would be the best.
Yeah.
I would think you guys probably. How long does it typically take to?
So so I think what Mike is saying is if we were to go, okay, we're gonna go RNG direct injection.
Right.
What would it take from a timeline standpoint to have a system in place?
Mark?
2 years.
Years.
You know, realistic, I'd say 2 years. A fast track project right now is 1.5 years because of the permitting and getting the engineering done, getting that design, getting that in construction. So I would say sometime in 2024, whether you're early or late in that year, that's the reality of a project.
The same with the trucking option then?
With both of the RNG projects, it's a 2-year long project.
Direct use on site, that's 6 months to 1 year.
Yep. Continued electrical generation is nothing. Get your PPA done and keep going with it.
The one thing that the chart, if I saw it correctly, I mean, we've been seeing such drastic drops in the amount of gas that's being produced in the hill. And when I was looking at it, I believe it looks like it's leveling out and it's going to stay similar to what it is for the next 15 years. Was I reading that wrong? We're going out to 18 years.
Well, no, and you're reading it right. Now you will have year-over-year decreases, but these curves use a first order decay rate, and they do have this long tail on them that slowly goes to 0. I would expect similar flow rates, maybe a little bit less every year for the next 10 to 15 years, based on that decay rate. But yeah, I mean, you know, we could drop a line and kind of see, you know, this appears that it was a pretty steep drop here, but now it looks like it's leveling off. I would expect it to continue to level off, slowly decreasing year over year. But again, this is one of the risks also.
Lee, can you go to the slide that had the RNG direct injection option that had the kind of the chart on the right? It'll explain kind of one thing on a closed landfill that's not active.
This one?
Yes. So we do work on wastewater treatment digesters, ag digesters, food digesters, and landfills. Landfills are the most difficult to put an RNG processing system on, and I'll tell you why. So we take our biogas source and we go through a pre-treatment. We're pressurizing it. We're taking out some moisture. There may be some VOC removal in there, but then we'll go to the CO2 removal, CH4 enrichment. If we're working on a digester, a wastewater treatment plant, we're done there. Then we go right off to our off-gas control pipeline. In a landfill, we have a fair amount of nitrogen and oxygen that comes in because we're under a vacuum and we're, you know, drawing the gas in. On a digester that's under positive pressure, it's not uncommon for us to see methane in 60 to 65%, where I'm guessing on your landfill, you're somewhere in that 50%, John. You know,
Right.
Yeah, and that's not uncommon. A big cost in treating landfill gas is this nitrogen removal and the oxygen removal, which adds to your O&M, which makes it more difficult. And when a developer, you know, you would say, hey, we got 700 CFM, 800 CFM on a closed site. It's not going to be high on their priority list because they're going to spend their money on more active sites. It's not that it can't be done, but they're certainly looking for the largest return on their money. And that's where developers are going to go.
Well, and Mark, just to add one thing to that, because this just came up recently. We work on an active landfill in Wisconsin, and they had a developer approach them and say, we want to put on an RNG plant. We're going to do this. It's going to be an outstanding project. But the county is trying to move forward with organic diversion, and they want to reduce the amount of waste that's going in the landfill. The county told this developer, said, yeah, you can have whatever we get, but just so that you know, we do not give any promises at all for the generation or the collection because we're trying to do organic diversion. We're trying to do leachate circulation to front end loads so that we have less landfill gas to deal with in the low end or on the back end. And that developer seemed to run for the hills. That's risk and uncertainty that, I mean, you're talking about a $16 to $25 million plant that could go in. A lot of these developers don't want to do that without the kind of assurance that they're going to have
No.
consistent gas generated and collected over time.
Which is typically why it's much less risk if you've got a 2 to 3 year payback. And okay, this gas is going to be pretty consistent for that. So that can make it much more attractive. If it's going to be a 10, 15 year payback, there's a lot of uncertainty with what the renewable natural gas market is going to be, what are the laws and regulations, and what is the gas generation. I can pretty much, I think I like to predict relatively some certainty over the next 3 to 5 years that this market is still going to be here. What we're hearing in California, the West Coast is driving a lot of this. There are some laws going in place that are going to increase the demand for renewable natural gas. So we've got a counterpart in our Paul Stout in our California office I work very closely with on renewable natural gas projects. We watch the market nationally.
The question would be how much.
No, you're the chairman, you go first.
Thank you. I would, how much does it cost to convert like those diesel vehicles to this type of fuel?
We'll tell you what's going on in the market. Early on, we were seeing some conversions and the large companies, the waste managements at that time, Advanced, GFL, Republic, they were looking at converting typically right now because vehicles get replaced every 5 to 10 years. They're just buying new vehicles. And I think at that time, converting vehicles was somewhere, it's going to be somewhere in that $50,000 range for a large engine. A large part of that is actually those compressed natural gas storage tanks having enough on those. So we're really not seeing gasoline or diesel engines being converted anymore. I think that that market has dropped off by the wayside and it's just strictly new vehicles. They're going to perform much better. And as I said, there's enough people have been doing this now for 5-10 years. They're just moving their vehicles around to make sure CNG vehicles are where they put their stations.
Back in the 70s, I was in the valley. I had an LP driven Ford pickup truck, one of the first ones around or whatever. The thing ran extremely efficient. You never had to worry about changing the oil.
Yeah, that's what I said, lower maintenance. And we had a dual fuel vehicle when we started in this. I think it was a Ford F-250, could run on gasoline or renewable natural gas. And we did do some dynameter testing on emissions and power. And they were all very similar, except the one thing that was a huge difference was the emissions on the CNG and Bio Cng, as we called it, much cleaner emissions.
And the reason I got out of that was when I seen some training videos on the explosive range and whatever, because there wasn't any protection devices. They just put a big LP cylinder in the back of your pickup truck, piped it in and whatever. And then I seen some training videos on it when you got to a scene of an accident and whatever, and how quickly they want to ignite. And then not that they explode, but it causes heartburn for a lot of stuff. So not good if you're a fire department. I sold mine after a year, but I was, and there was in the 70s, there wasn't a lot of fueling stations for that. They weren't equipped to do that kind of stuff. So it was, but anyway, it was maintenance wise and whatever, it was really a positive experience for me and whatever. Mike?
Well, I mean, yeah, on top of that, are there, when you're talking about vehicles, whether it be within the county or municipal or buses or whatever, do we even know if there is a fleet or combination of fleets that is within a 15-mile radius that would even, what do we know about that?
Well, the city of Oshkosh, when they purchased automated collection vehicles for garbage. They ended up buying CNG ones. So the city of Oshkosh has a fleet. I'm not sure how long they're in their cycle, but they've had them for a while.
And they're used and natural gas. That's.
Yeah,
They're not even able to use regular.
I don't think so. I think they're just
So there's a
CNG.
CNG directly, and so
Yeah.
where do they get there from? Quick Trip?
Quick Trip, yeah. Yeah, there's a few different waste haulers. I know Harders, Fox Valley has some CNG vehicles. Waste Management shows up here with some CNG vehicles. But
So
if
we
it's,
gotta,
there's
we
some,
have a captured audience, so to speak,
right,
sometimes of, okay, so Mike, is that a viable option to at least explore? That one seems to me to be the lowest hanging fruit, maybe, because it's not, it doesn't, it might just take a lot of talking and
Sure.
organizing, but it's not a bunch of, it's not $16.9 million
right.
of capital.
Well, I think probably the biggest thing is, yeah, we could certainly reach out to all our haulers. The city of Neenah could convert their vehicles.
Sure.
Yeah.
Get right on.
And develop a list or a plan for who might participate, but you'd have,
The point here is,
Yeah.
you do have a staging area with everyone who comes here, right? You've got a place that people already come anyway. If
Right.
we had a location to get them to fuel up, so to
Sure.
speak.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the dumbest idea.
Right. I think it just,
That's true.
it just boils down to the economics of what we could sell, what we end up having to sell the fuel for.
Well, but I mean, this one, that the internal rate of return was the highest on this.
Right.
That one just, I don't know why that one interests me, because again, we have a captured audience here. that,
Sure.
As you say, you get Neenah, we could certainly discuss our, hauling,
Collection.
collection line again. Maybe this is even when gas gets to $10 a gallon, maybe this will be, even,
Sure.
if there's ever a time for momentum to
Mhm.
be a part of this, it would certainly.
Yeah, this is a really, it's a viable option, and the pictures that you see on this slide are at Randolph Farms, a private landfill in Indiana, that we did one project for them. They tried it, and then we ended up putting a second system in, and they're running their own garbage trucks there. It's been very successful. They've got a backup natural gas line coming in if something comes down from a reliability standpoint. But it can be a very good project. And the thing about, I talked about the oxygen and the nitrogen. You can go into a landfill and select your best wells and just route that gas down to a system. You don't have to treat all 700 CFM. I think it's 100 CFM is going to give you 1,000 gallons. It's a small amount of gas, 1,000 gallons of diesel equivalent every day. So a small amount of fuel produces a lot of fuel. So it's a little bit less capital. There's not all of the oxygen, nitrogen removal in a system, but we'd select some of those positive wells. That's a subsidiary of this kind of on-site vehicle fuel option.
And just to follow up, based upon the amount of fuel being produced, we need 20 large trucks. That's the number.
Yeah, it depends upon how much gas you're going to treat. And I think this was based on, Lee, was that on the 600, 700?
Yeah, I'm just looking.
When you kind of take a look at that, you're not going to use it all the time. The trucks don't run every day. Those are the sorts of things that we get into a much more detailed financial analysis on this system. That would be kind of a next step. If you actually, the big caveat here is, do you actually have someone who can use this fuel locally?
But 20 is sort of the round number of what we would be if we were looking at this
Yeah, and you can look at it this way. That's a truck using 50 diesel gallons equivalent, or is it 40 vehicles that are using 25 gallons of diesel a time? You know, and that might be a school bus fleet or something like that.
Mark, that was a slipstream of gas. It looks like that was 178 MMBTU per day is what was used for that estimate.
Okay,
So that was essentially doing what Mark was saying with a slipstream. Select your best wells, you know, your 5 to 10 best wells, pull them into a separate system, get them to your CNG facility. That's what that models.
But I mean, this
You-
is, your numbers assume sort of maximizing the value of this. If you even get half of that, you're still at an internal rate of return probably over 20% with a payback
Yeah.
around a year.
you know, and that, what we do, and I'll just give you an idea, we got the lower capital costs at 5 million when we've done the on-site vehicle fuels. Let's talk in today's dollars. The smaller systems we've done are probably would be in that 2 million. The larger ones are going to be in that 10 million, depending upon what you get with it. But that 5.8 million is for what you're looking at. It's going to be somewhere in that vicinity. You can scale these up or down.
And actually, Mark, I was just looking to see, I think I have, yeah, so this is essentially what we're talking about here. It's a small slipstream of gas coming into a Bio Cng, which is just generating vehicle fuel. So it's this size. In the back here, you have your storage vessels. Those are the horizontal. That's storing your compressed natural gas.
This
This is your
hydrogen
membrane.
sulfide treatment, the tank up front. That's a 200 CFM system, and that is the one I believe at Randolph Farms.
Yep.
And actually, that
Now-
concrete pad you see in the front there, right in the lower right corner, that was phase 1. We put concrete in there for phase 2 right away.
Yep.
You know, they were being proactive.
And to show the scale issue, by the way, I'm going to pull up another presentation. So for those of you who know John Welch from Dane County, that's John Welch in 2011 with the very first Bio Cng system, which took 50 SCFM. And this is them filling up one of their first truck that they filled up with compressed natural gas. So, and this is true.
Don't tell John, but that was right after the fire inspector left and said, here's what you have to do to use this. Some sort of sign or something was supposed to be on there. So we did it. A guy by the name of Mike DiMaggio was out there trying to do burners with the wheels. He got in the truck.
When you go ahead.
You mentioned storing the compressed natural gas. Right now, the way I understand it, the hill produces X amount of gas. If we don't use it, it's flared off. How much can you store? I mean, is it, if on Saturdays and Sundays when none of the fleets are running, do we end up having to burn off the gas, or can a certain amount be stored?
You can store it, and what you see in that top picture there is an offloading station. And in between those, there's some, that tank you see there is a propane tank. We'll fill that with gas to about 250 PSI. It's a less expensive form of storage when we wanted to have some for weekends. The tanks that you see on the tube trailer and in the back are somewhere around 3,500 to 4,000 PSI. So if you're not using that fuel, and all of these systems are automated, that, you know, if once these are filled, essentially the gas then has to go to the flare because it has to go somewhere. You're not storing it in the landfill and we can't produce anymore. So we try and size these systems so we've always got some sort of storage. It's a fine line between how much storage you need. It's expensive, you know, and what's this trade-off availability. There does get to be some usage of how many vehicles can fill at once, you know, depending upon your flow rate. If you wanted to have the whole fleet come up and fill at once, you're going to need an awful lot of storage. That is something that is considered. Is the projects we've done a lot of vehicles, there is some staggered, or I think you had the one, those are slow fill posts where essentially that's just an overnight fill. You know, they're called time fill. They're slow.
Yep, the buses just park up to it, they fill overnight. The other style is it's like your regular gas pump, which we had that somewhere in There.
That was the other picture you had right there. That's a fast fill. You drive up to it. They have both at this site in Indiana, so trucks can pull up and fill up. But then they also have their fleet of vehicles that come in at night and park there. So that gets into some of the logistics with a fleet on what's actually viable. So hey, I'm going to have to apologize here. I've got to jump off onto another call that I really need to be on.
I can stick around still and answer any more questions.
If you can do that, Lee, that would help out, and certainly available. And more than anything, you know, working with Lee here, as you're in your infancy of, hey, can we do something with this? I think the answer is certainly, but some of it's an appetite for how much capital is there and how much risk.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks, Mark.
Good. All right. Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk.
I have guess it's a question with the value of natural gas, you know, has escalated 60%, you know, price wise and whatever. And I was always a proponent of just piping that gas to that prison over there. But the leadership of that whole organization didn't see fit to do that. And whatever, you know, I think if we're going to get out of generating electricity, that would be an easy option too. You know, you got, because they're going to pay 40% more for their fuel bills. And I'll bet you there's everything over there is generated, all the heat's generated. They might even have heat pumps over there and all that stuff. So, I mean, it's like, it's something that I think there should be, we should have some consideration that be part of something. I don't know if there's somebody over there now you can talk to, or if there's somebody at a higher level.
The county owned jail.
The jail, no, yeah, the jail, no, but I'm talking about the prison, state prison that's over there.
Oh.
That consumes
Okay.
volumes of
Okay.
stuff.
Yep.
And I don't know if we have the capacity, you know, if that would have to go into a multi-fuel or whatever, or if we could just provide enough where we could cut a deal with it, whatever, but I don't know. I mean, it's just, that would be a low capital. Yeah. Well, you would think so, but it never gets by the gatekeeper.
The local representatives.
Well, I think we tried that too. I think we tried that too, and we got the door slammed on us, so. When
The lack of cooperative spirits that I have seen being on.
You know, just to add, these direct use projects, I've been involved with a lot of them because, you know, back in early 2000s, they were very easy and they got credits and they paid well. So I've done a lot of them. The best ones are when the end user comes to you first because they want that gas. They have the foresight to see the savings. When the landfill owner has to go and approach an end user about it, it's always a more difficult sell. Not impossible. I mean, we've done numerous of them, but it's always a little bit more difficult because you have to convince somebody like this is going to help you. Here's the financials. And then they may start questioning, you know, every dollar and cents that you have in your financial performance. But, you know, I've even done a 17-mile long pipeline before from a landfill to a Kimberly-Clark toilet paper plant. It's once you have that spirit of working together is when this works. If it's adversarial or if it generates friction, even at the beginning, it's going to be a tough road to go. But I agree, it's a very attractive process and project if we can get past that first step.
One more question again, just on the on-site vehicle fuel option. With regard to, if you were trying to cobble together some consortium of entities that have vehicles that could use this, is the idea that you would sell it below market, below what they can get at Quick Trip? What would be the incentive to try to cobble together something like that? Is that part of the incentive for them?
Right, great question. So normally when we do a vehicle fuel for sale, we will use there is a published standard value. for each region, essentially, of what natural gas costs for compressed natural gas. And we generally tell them, hey, whatever the market value is, and it's actually market value is a little bit less than even at Quick Trip, because Quick Trip needs to make a profit too. We're going to give 75% of that published value every week. We change our rate, and that's what it is. Or every 3 months, we change our rate. Okay. So when we build economic pro formas for this, we take into account a reduced value of the gas based on that published value that is going to be used. And I can't remember, there's a particular organization out of Chicago actually that sets that value or that publishes that value. So yeah, their incentive is, they're paying 75 cents on a dollar for the DGE, which is substantial savings when they are burning through 50 DGEs a day in 20 trucks. I mean, that's a lot of money. And the convenience factor also is huge, and shouldn't be undersold. If you have a place for them to, let's say you want to do what the photo on the bottom here, this is a time fill, overnight fill. If you tell one operator, let's say you talk to City of Oshkosh and say, hey, if you guys want, we can put in slow post fill trucks. Your truck drivers drive to our site, they leave the truck here overnight, we fill it overnight, it's gassed up, ready to go the next day. Well, now they have less storage that they need to do with their trucks. They have all of them in one location. They're getting filled up. They're not going away from their route to be able to fill. There's a financial benefit in that also for the owner of the fleet.
One more question. We would, if you were trying to sell this to a group of communities or whatever, we would be able to, based upon the graph again, be able to theoretically guarantee them this product for no less than 15 years, no more than 20. Is that what the number, is that what the graph shows?
It does show that. And I will say, I never guarantee anything. I'm always afraid to do that. But what I can say is that a small vehicle fuel project like this, you should certainly be able to get it for 15 years, because if, for example, one of the key wells goes bad, you run a new lateral line to a well that's still producing well and pull that gas off. So this wouldn't use all your fuel. You would still be flaring some landfill gas. Generally, it's going to be the bad landfill gas that you have a surface hit, you need to turn up a well, something like that. So you should be able to maintain that flow rate. And I don't have the conversion in front of me, but what Mark said earlier, 1 to 200 SCFM, you guys are running north of 700 SCFM right now. We're taking just a small portion of that. You should certainly have at least 200 SCFM available for the next several years.
So looking at these numbers, and I'm not asking you to guarantee it, but we've been looking at about 1.8 million net once everything's paid. Does that sound about right? I mean, if we're going to pay out 5.8 in capital in 2.8 years.
Yeah, so the 5.8 capital would be essentially the front end cost of it. So that would be over an RNG project like this is still going to be probably 1.5 to 2 year long project. Yeah, it would be give or take about 6 million, 5.8 million. But then you also need to add in your operational costs, even on that first year, because you're going to be having to tune the well field and do things like that, get the system up and running. So there's another 900,000 in your operational cost. That's your OPEX. But then, yes, you would be getting the payback on whatever gas you're generating for the fleet vehicles to use. What I will say is that this is our preliminary model, right? So we do these a lot. We do these beneficial use studies quite a bit. This is generally the first cut. We're gonna, we take a shotgun approach. Spray and pray. Put out 5 or 6 different types of projects, see what seems to pencil out the best, see where the appetite for risk lays with the county. The next step really is, let's put pen to paper on 1 or 2 of these and get the more fine detail to give you the actual numbers. That would involve things like talking to herders or herds from the Fox Valley, talking to City of Oshkosh, talking to your county, talking about, do they have public transportation? Do they have snow plows that are going to CNG? Get those sort of information dialed in, right? If we suddenly start doing this first exercise and we say, boy, City of Oshkosh has 20 trucks and they're willing to take all the gas at 80% of the published value. That's information that can be put into the model really confidently, which then gives you the ability to go to your constituents and say, hey, we did the first thing. We looked at 7 different options or 6 different options. We've got 1 or 2 that look awesome. We're going to go and just really pencil this out to the detail, make sure that it all works. That's when we get quotes from vendors. Angie, which on the picture on the top, that station, the fill post essentially is made by Angie. Their costs have gone up by 40% in the last year and a half since I last did a project with them. But we would get those updated costs, get those updated quotes, and really come down with a very fine economic pro forma that you can then hang your hat on and say, we're confident in this with a 90+% confidence. These are the numbers where we're going to be.
I just was looking up the cost of CNG at Quick Trip. It's $229.9 DG.
So my guess is the published value is probably something like 210, right? Quick Trip's adding a little bit to that published value, but then you would be selling it for, let's say it's $2. You'd say it's $1.50, right? That $1.50 is what's going in your pocket to pay back that capital. The whatever it is, 60 some cents extra, that's the avoided cost for the end user. That's where they see their value, right? And we can do pro formas on both sides so that when we do go to talk to City of Oshkosh, we can say, here's what we expect your bills to be, and here's what we expect your bills to be after our system's in place.
Yep.
Wow, holy crap. No kidding.
Yeah, premium diesel, $5.49.9 today.
And this is
$229.9. Diesel gallon equivalent. Yeah.
Wow. I think we could make it lower than that.
So
I think that's so many numbers.
well, like we had mentioned, I mean, this is kind of their shotgun approach. They looked at a bunch of different options for us. And then we need to decide if we want to hone in on one of the options. And if we want to hone in on looking at, you know, the on-site vehicle fuel, then we get a proposal from Tetra Tech to.
Most about this, first of all, it should be all in instead of price of gas now. 2, they should be able to buy new vehicles that can handle the natural gas. But my one concern with the interstate connection and so forth is trucking this stuff back and forth. I mean, are we buying semis? Are we hiring drivers? Or where do you hire your drivers? I mean, maybe you can end up with the same equipment and share it with the bottle, but when they just come here, grab it and pay for it, I like that idea.
Right, but I think we should, this is an opportunity to probably go through a process with the BOW and talk about these issues and whatever, and just, because usually what happens is everybody goes their own way. That's what's happening now.
Yes, and it would benefit them probably more than us, because they're looking at generating a lot of gas down the future, so it would be certainly worth talking to them.
But time is money.
Yeah,
I'm telling you, if you can turn something around in 6 months versus 2 years, that's a lifetime.
Yeah, and I guess as far as just a clarification, as far as we're mentioning Outagamie County, I mean, they have a third-party developer that's investing the capital in the plant. So it's not Outagamie County that's building this facility, it's someone else. They're just selling the gas to the developer. So, and I know for a fact, that they don't have an offloading station currently in their design. So,
and just to throw it out there, you know, we talk to a lot of developers in our role, and we actually got a call about the developer at Outagamie looking to possibly to divest his shares also in the Outagamie gas rights. But in this market, you never know what's happening. Every day is a new thing that pops up and a new rumor that starts. Boy, we deal with Marathon County. That's one of our longest term clients. And the things that we've dealt with on their gas rights have been amazing. It's really just the crazy things that happen in this market because there's so much money to be made.
So John, what's next? What do we want to?
I guess we need to decide if you're done with questions for Lee. And he can drop off, and I guess we can talk a little bit more internally, and
I think that's a good idea.
Does he have a recommendation as to which one, if you were sitting here, which one would you want to pursue?
uh-oh, not to be put on the spot.
No, I actually, so this is awesome. I do this myself regularly, right? Because I always want to put myself in your place, right? Like if I was the landfill, what would I do? How would I spend my money? You know, because right now it's not my money. I can tell you to do an RNG plant, you're going to make the most, but I don't have 16.9 million I can dump in that. If I were sitting on the board right now, I would think the best options right now, because of a declining gas curve, because of the potential issues with the developer being involved in Outagamie, Brown County's uncertain future on what they're going to do, I would personally think either continuing with electrical generation, if I could get a PPA that would work financially, that's the easiest thing to do, right? If I'm not trying to go out of my way to use this gas, electrical generation is the easiest. But it's unlikely that would pan out in the long term with the financials. I believe that on-site vehicle fuel is a very good option if you can convince people to sign on board with a contract to purchase that gas. And that really depends on if you have the relationship with these different trucking companies, if you have the contacts. If you can get that, on-site vehicle fuel is a fairly low maintenance, low operational cost activity. These systems are very simple. That would be my preferred route, even though injecting a pipeline is going to give you a lot more revenue. They're really difficult systems to run. I mean, very, very complicated systems, and there's a lot of downtime. Dane County, for example, has 5 people full-time, staffed 24 hours a day to keep their plant up and running. That's not something that I personally have the appetite for, knowing what goes into it. A CNG vehicle, very easy. Plug it in, you let it chug along, it generates the gas, and as long as people are using it, you're making the revenue back on.
One more question, since this keeps coming up about leaving the trucks overnight. How long does it take to fill an empty vehicle at a natural gas filling station? How long does it take? On the
Fast fill?
Yeah, so there's 2 options, right? The first one, and the photos here show both of them. This bottom, this is overnight, right? These systems are cheaper. That's why you can see. So actually, the picture on the top, in the background, you can see those exact slow fill posts that are in this photo on the bottom. These are very cheap to get. They don't need high pressure gas. So you put these things in, several of them, let them fill up overnight. If that's not an option and someone wants it to be like a truck stop, the picture on the top is called a quick fill post. This is just like being at your Quick Trip. You get in there, you pull the handle, the CNG goes right into your vehicle. It fills up in the same amount of time as it would if you were sitting in a Quick Trip. But those are a little bit more expensive. They require some additional components. It's a high pressure system versus a low pressure. So there's some additional compressors. But again, these systems have been around for 2 decades now, and they work very well. But those are the 2. You can do it just like at a Quick Trip.
In theory, you could offer both. In theory.
Yes, and this site does that, right? So for trucks that just want to come in, get a quick fill up of gas and go, I mean, they even have a credit card scanner on this. So like if the trucker doesn't have a fleet card, he can come in, put in a company credit card and fill up his gas tank. But the trucks that are the owners, they come and park right behind here. That's the owner's vehicle just sitting right behind where that quick fill post is. So they run both of them. And this is the site that has doubled in capacity since they put in a pilot study, right? They were interested in the idea. They said, we're going to take 100 SCFM, see how it works. Wasn't a huge investment for them. So they took 100 SCFM off to the side. They realized, oh my goodness, we've used every stitch of compressed natural gas that we generated. Let's double the capacity. And they put in a second pit skid before they were even done with full flush out of the first skid. They were like, we need more of this. This is working great.
Is there a road tax on that fuel? And if there is a tax, is it included in that calculation?
I am not sure. These were in Indiana. I don't know the rules that they had to follow. And I'll talk to Mark specifically about a road tax for Wisconsin if you use them.
Maybe there is a benefit. Maybe there is a, and maybe the government at some point encourages you to do this kind of stuff. I don't, that just boiled to the surface.
Yep. I will double check. I'm sure that if there is a road tax, it's probably not included in the pro forma, only because we use that pro forma across the country. So we don't have very specific information for states in it.
So if we're selling at 75%, is there a chance Quick Trip or Shell or one of these companies would buy what we have and then take it to their store, sell it at an increase, or is that not likely?
I've never seen that before. Yeah, I've never seen that. I mean, Quick Trip buys a tremendous amount of natural gas. They get it at bulk buying pricing, which is below the consumer value. So I would doubt it. You also wouldn't really have the infrastructure to be able to fill Quick Trip. Quick Trip uses, Quick Trip's going to haul their gas in vehicles that look like this, right? This is at 3,000 PSI. Out of these, it's coming out in the hundreds of PSI. So you couldn't even fill one of their tanker trucks with your equipment if you have this.
Right.
You would steal their customers. I mean, there's no question about that, but they wouldn't buy it from you.
Okay.
Anything more questions? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And call me anytime you need. The contact information for us is on the end of the presentation. I look forward to talking to you and moving on to the next step of the project. I'm excited for this one.
Okay. Great. Thanks for your time, Lee, and thank Mark for us again, too.
I will. Thank you all. Have a good day.
All right. You too.
Bye.
Yeah, I'm more confused
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
Okay. May I, Mr. Chairman, may I say a couple words?
Whatever you say, Paul, go ahead.
Thank you. Okay. From my perspective, I would like to see a matrix table of options that gives the maximum benefits of the four options with the minimum risk and expense. I've been following the various options. Of course, sitting here behind an army of trailer trucks going at 75 miles an hour with 40 to 60 mile an hour gusts of wind. It's difficult for me, and of course, I'm not the engineer. I'm not the scientist. But from my layman's perspective, I would like to see a matrix of these four options their maximum benefit and their minimum risk and expense.
Okay. I don't know if you want, I think the easiest way to do that is
That's it.
must be able to eliminate one of those
Sure.
proposals and
yeah.
whatever, the most expensive one of them probably take thousands of dollars to evaluate.
Yeah.
And whatever, so I think what the board should do is pare it down. Gotta get the real number.
Right.
Yeah, you don't have any real solid numbers. These are all just, this is a sales pitch
Yeah,
that we heard.
yeah, I want to echo that same thing. I mean,
Okay.
I mean, it's a good engineering evaluation of our site, our gas and option, but it is somewhat of a sales pitch too, because the company, the Tetra Tech company, does have some involvement with the company that produces these Bio Cng plants and the Rng equipment. So there is a little bit of a connection there that, but I guess the one thing I want to mention, and this is kind of the reasons behind it, is we authorized Tetra Tech to do this study for us, but we also authorized both to kind of take the information that Tetra Tech pulled together for us and provide kind of like a second set of eyes from maybe more of the county's perspective, knowing more about what we have going on site and maybe looking at some different options. So I've already, the report that Tetra Tech provided is like, 25, 30 pages long. It's more detailed than this presentation today. But I've already shared that with both. We've already had some discussions about some of the options in this report, and then looking at some other things that Tetra Tech didn't look at. So I think right now what I'd like to do is the next step is to bring FOTH in to have some sort of a presentation to our board.
Evaluate the evaluator.
You evaluate the evaluator, right? Yeah.
I do believe that time is a little bit of essence.
Right.
Goes out at the end of the year, so.
Right.
While we're waiting you listen to phone, I really think somebody, and I think somebody you need to be calling the city of Oshkosh and say, hey, you can buy this stuff for 75 cents on the dollar. Are you interested? And get a hold of the county and find out, do they have any that are running on natural gas? Are they looking to add any new vehicles? Why would they consider and find out first off if we even have a
customer
market
right.
for it? And I don't know, you wouldn't have to ask me a lot if I get 10, 20 trucks and you're gonna sell it to me for 75 cents on the dollar.
That being the big $5.8 million question is what would we have to sell it for? Because the one thing that FOTH did for us back in the day is they looked at, when this technology started coming out, they looked at this for us. And their calculations determined that we would need to sell it for like closer to $3 a DGN to provide the necessary payback for the equipment. Yeah. And at that time, Quick Trip was selling it for $1.99. So it didn't make sense. Now, yeah, obviously diesel prices, things have changed. Certainly can take another detailed look at it. And
What question is, do you have a place that, a filling station, so to speak, is there?
Right next to the 980. Well, put it right next door. How about
Quite seriously, there would be no better time than to make an approach on the old Huber Law facility and say, if you want that, you can have the hole we dug out and everything else, just give us this so we can have something convenient and easy to get in and out of it.
Wouldn't be a major issue that a spot.
Well, I mean, we do have that area over.
There's enough room over there.
There's enough room over there. We had talked about potential, I mean, we were kind of holding it potentially in case we need to upgrade our transfer station.
Right.
But, you know, in the past, they talked about building a, you know, a new courthouse, admin facility and.
Yeah, and again, just to full circle this, I think part of the attraction, maybe just for me, and being kind of representing local government, is, you know, the kind of coming together of like-minded purpose and
Sure.
like-minded need.
Sure.
To go, yeah, maybe this is kind of a win-win
For
for everybody. Well, certainly, or at least for, I mean, if somebody has anything in the fleet, even if you got 2 or 3 trucks in the fleet that need to come here anyway,
Mhm.
that's every.
Yeah,
I mean,
right
you know,
there.
we're starting to budgets now again. We've got vehicles. This is, it's brutally the thinking about it.
Mhm.
Now, I don't, you know, what are we all going to do?
How fast can folk?
I'll have to talk to Chris, but I guess I was thinking of one of the July meetings, whether they could get their evaluation pulled together by July 6th or July 20th, but one of those two, I'd like to try to have them
I'd like to compress it.
if we can, yeah.
When he was talking, having to get $3 a gallon, was he kind of, were they at that time comparing to what we were getting through electric generation, or was that? I mean, at that time, we're getting in a lot of money. If
Yeah.
I get told, pay to go to this, but look at how much I make a year. I don't.
I think they were looking kind of more holistically at Bio Cng, creating vehicle fuel
Okay.
and what we would have to sell it for in order for it to, you know, provide the necessary payback. And at that time, it was higher than it might be now.
Yeah, like Pat said, sooner than that.
Yeah.
Again, but if you remember what Lee said at the very end, the easiest thing is just do what you. That's it, that's the least, I mean, because you don't know what that rate's gonna be either. Because I'll guarantee you, the power company, there's a lot of new initiatives coming down the pipe where they're gonna pay a little more for green power, they're gonna do all that kind of good stuff. And I think the utility is kind of holding back. They're, you know, that's their business and making money and whatever, but it's like, we need the heat on this.
I told you.
But, well, that's a good, then you work it,
Okay,
work the magic with Chris and Bolt and whatever, and see if they can push, you know, compress that, and
sure.
I think that's a good idea.
Is it possible to get a copy of that report that I could read?
Yes.
You
want a
email
hard copy or?
You can email it to me.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you want an electronic copy of this report they gave today, I have that. It's a big file, but.
That'd be fine.
So,
I'd
okay.
like the summary.
You like the condensed version? Okay,
Yeah, can you just send me an email?
sure. Okay.
Okay. Well, great, that's over with, how about budget adjustment?
Budget adjustment, yeah. Well, we had, I guess I made an error last week, so I just need to have a little bit of a correction. I don't know if you can pull up my. So we had talked about the legal expenses, increasing the budget for legal. What we actually need to do is under legal services for the admin 52801 is where it needs to go. We're also spending legal dollars in landfill gas, and I had kind of combined those two, but we need to split it off separately. So what we need is, instead of adding 90,000 to the budget, we need to add 95,000 the admin budget, 52801, 55001, which is legal services. So it's an extra $5,000 of what you approved the last time.
So. Motion's made and seconded to.
Paul, can you unmute?
There you go.
I'm here.
You hear that motion, Paul?
I did.
Okay. It's been made and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
I
Thank you. Motion is carried.
Okay, and I guess the second item, just stay up on number 7. The second item is we need to do a budget transfer. When we had to purchase that Toro zero-turn mower because our mower at Snell Road had a failure and couldn't be repaired, what they want us to do is do a capital substitution. So we had excess money for our Volvo loader. So we had budgeted 275. It came in at 254, 350. So we have an excess in that line item of $20,650. What we'd like to do is apply the mower expense of $14,108 to that $20,650. And there's a budget transfer form that we'll put together and finance will take care of it.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Paul?
He's muted.
Any discussion?
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think this budget transfer is gonna end up appearing on the Personnel and Finance Committee agenda, just as for information. I don't think it's gonna go beyond that, so. So those are just the two housekeeping items under number 7 there that I wanted to address. Okay, going on to the next one.
Director's report.
Yeah, we have a new agenda item that we're debuting today. We're going to have a director's report on each one of these agendas, and it'll specify what items I'm going to talk about. So the first thing is the 2023 budget. We had our kickoff meeting on June 7th, so last week, Tuesday, and they laid out the full schedule for when our budgets are due. And I had a little follow-up after the meeting, just with the finance director and acting finance director and the executive that, we're going to be able to deviate slightly from their schedule because of our board structure and the fact that we're not on the tax levy. So what the plan is much like we have in the past, that we'll internally work on developing our budget and roughing out tipping fees for waste and recycling for 2023. We'll put together a packet that'll go out no later than July 29th. I'm shooting for July 27th. A packet of budget information. Then we'll have a budget workshop on August 3rd. Probably plan on from 9 to noon. Don't make a tea time at 11, Pat. And we'll work through that budget packet and then hopefully be able to agree on tipping fees. Then we'll circle back the next meeting in August. So August 17th, we'll kind of finalize the budget packet. And then right now we're scheduled to have our budget executive review on August 25th, a Thursday, at 10:15 a.m. So that is the schedule for the budget right now. It started a little later and it's finishing about the same time. So we've got a pretty tight window to crank this out, and there's a lot of variables that are going to happen with our, uncertainty in the gas to energy. with kind of the new things that are happening in our bowl arrangement with the cost sharing. We'll have to make some assumptions as best we can, but we'll work to get you a nice solid budget for 2023.
Probably with the agenda then, or whatever. The rotation should be probably when we say it's like try and attend, it's gonna be a longer meeting, scheduled
Right.
meeting and whatever,
Yeah.
so.
And Cassie will provide snacks, right?
I will pick stuff up.
So, I guess just a couple of things on department operations. Again, we're continuing to operate our transfer station. The amount of shingles that we're getting in these days is just crazy. With the storm damage north of here, it's just the shingle company vehicles are just lined up first thing in the morning, ready to unload, and it's so much so that the guys are saying it's a challenge loading the compactors now, because one bucket full of trash weighs a certain amount. If you have mostly shingles, it's like five or six scoops and the thing is full. It's got 30 tons of payload on it. So it's, yeah.
I'll tell you, it's living up there, as you said, that we missed it. Right
We
before-
just missed
We
it.
just
Mike.
missed it. You go, it's like a racket
Yes.
of these roofing companies that have just converged
Yeah.
on these neighborhoods, and basically they got 3, 4, 5 of them
Yeah.
knocking on their door.
Yeah.
How much money that's worth?
Well, I know, and I mean, the insurance companies must be paying.
Right.
I was stunned. I drove in the neighborhood, I go, what the freak is going on? There was a sign in every yard.
Yeah.
I couldn't
Yeah.
believe it.
Can't you direct them to direct call? Tell them you don't want it down there?
They're just cash customers.
Yeah.
So then it would just be Outagamie County's.
Well, see, why they come all the way down here if it's way up there is where it's.
It's cheaper. They're bringing in dirty shingles. So Outagamie's rate at the gate is $50 per ton, I believe, right?
Yeah.
And ours is 48.
Maybe we should-
It's up 200% from last year. Yeah, then they're bringing in loads that are range, I would say roughly between 4 to 10 tons on a trailer.
Wow.
Yeah, just
What's
crazy.
their problem? They got quad axle?
They're overloaded. We've had the sheriff watching people coming in,
I would say.
but
And we're busy redoing our roof Woodhide's house, so we could have used the hail.
We throw her off. Well, maybe these shingles aren't so bad, you could sort through them. There you go.
Yeah. So Best is still doing a great job running the waste loads to both Outagamie and Brown. Some days we send a little more to Brown, some days we send a little more to Outagamie, but it's kind of a split. I guess gas energy operations continue. We're trying our best to run as many engines as possible during peak hours. Yesterday, the well field suffered a little bit over the weekend. So yesterday, engines started shutting down with the gas quality waning a little bit. But I see Clint has got 3 engines going again this morning. How long it'll be able to sustain that, but is unknown. But we're trying to maximize on peak generation when we can. And then Clint is going to be out of town this weekend, so we're going to be shutting down the engines on Thursday afternoon and then flaring the gas Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So, and then he'll start them back up on the 20th. So.
Should hire somebody to do a study.
Yeah. WPS revenues for the month of May, we had 109,821. Again, compared to last year when we had 4 engines available, we were at 140,989. But with the 3 engines that we have, I mean, that's, if we can hit 100,000 a month in revenue, that's probably a about as good as we're gonna be able to do for the time being. So we're at 572,687 through 5 months, average about 114,500. You know, hopefully by year end, we'll be able to clear the, you know, the $1 million revenue mark as long as things hold together, but you know, probably not gonna see much more than maybe 1.2. I think that the budget estimate was 1.52, but we're not gonna be able to reach that with the engine, one engine down. Highway department's not using the landfill gas. They didn't use any in March, April, and May. So, but it's still available to them. And then the last thing is our annual DNR closed landfill inspections. It was scheduled for this Friday. I got an email this morning that they wanted to move it to next Thursday. So next Thursday, the plan is for myself and Mitchell Bush, who's one of our environmental technicians that deals more with the long-term care maintenance of the landfills. He's gonna go with me on the inspections with DNR staff. I think there's gonna be 2 or 3 people from the DNR coming on site. They'll look at, they have a checklist of all the closed site items that they need to verify. One of the things that we might run into, getting a little ding here and there, and it's kind of a constant at Snell Road with the vegetation. There's still areas where, for whatever reason, grass does not like to grow. Probably has something to do with the cap integrity and thickness. So we might get a, you know, a non-compliance kind of thing where we have to hire a contractor to come in, fill low spots, add more topsoil, seed, fertilize, mulch areas. But that's becoming kind of a constant from a maintenance standpoint. At both these sites, we're going to start seeing, you're starting to see some more differential settlement on our co-disposal hill as well as the sludge site. So there's going to be more maintenance necessary on the cover, you know, make sure we don't have standing water and we have to keep the grass growing. So we'll see where that goes, but that's next week, Thursday. So. Yeah, so it sounds like our engineer from Green Bay, our hydro from Green Bay, and a new engineer is going to be coming out. So yeah, so that's my report.
Great. Anything else? I'll entertain a motion to return.
Wait.
Oh,
We gotta go through all of these.
well, that's all. That's
So any future agenda items, I mean, I know.
Yeah.
Next meeting will be July 6th.
Did you hear that, Paul? Oh, never mind.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion's been made to adjourn and seconded. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is, we are now adjourned.
Aye,
Oh, yeah, thank you.
goodbye.
Bye, Paul. Have a good trip.